Yes, and here they are. It's my pleasure to have them on board, and I don't want to lose many words to introduce them. I would like to start with Britta, ladies first. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Jochen. Great to be back again. Thanks for having me in this panel. My name is Britta Sims. I'm a managing director at Accenture Security Service, and I lead our European security group. I've been in SAP Security for about 20 years, new here in Europe. I spent the last 5 years in the US, so I'm very happy to be in Europe and meeting this new team of SAP Security group. Thanks, Jochen.
Go ahead. The next is Steffen Pietsch.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. So my name is Steffen Pietsch. I'm a member of the board of directors at DSAG, which is the German-speaking user group for SAP, and there we are representing more than 3,500 companies across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And within the board, I'm responsible for all technology-related topics. And in addition, in my main job role, I'm with the Haufe Group, a mid-sized media company based in Freiburg, Germany. And there I'm having the responsibility for business applications, which cover also all SAP related topics and our SAP footprint. And today I'm here with you and looking forward to the discussion.
This is wonderful, as you're not you're really also taking the vision of all the SAP users in Germany, representing them from DSAG. Wonderful. And I'm humbled to have Markus Meyer as well within the panel discussion. Markus, a few words for yourself?
Thanks, Jochen, for having me. Yes, also a few words to me. I'm Chief Information Security Officer at Fuchs Petrolub, as you can read above me. This is the largest independent lubricants manufacturer in the world. We have a turnover, sales around 2.5 billion, and we have approximately like 6,000 employees worldwide, and we have like approximately 90 locations around the globe. Yeah.
So thank you very much. But let's start in. My first question to you would be, how would you explain that we have almost 500,000 SAP customers worldwide? And in reality, only very few have really taken a deeper security project into consideration beyond identity and access management. What would you see as a reason for that? Starting with Britta again.
I think a couple of reasons. We frequently do not see the security organization involved in the SAP programs. And I think that's really the trigger for the lack of involvement for broader security programs. I think SAP, and this may be a mindset from clients, they're purchasing this leader in ERP space. SAP is obviously a big name, and I think there may be a perception of, well, I'm buying this ERP system, isn't it secure already? Why do I have to invest in wider security initiatives? So I think it's probably a combination of not understanding that you have to really look at security as well, and the involvement of the or C-level leadership.
It was super interesting. I had the conversation on JISEC in Dubai once, where someone from Saudi Arabia said to me, why do I need to secure SAP? It's German quality software. It should be secure by default. But hope is not a strategy, as we learned earlier in the video. What are your thoughts about it, Markus Weissensel?
Yeah, I think the reason, from my perspective, it's more something like a black box to many of the companies. They do not know what is inside exactly, and they do not want to open it because they're afraid something might come out where they have to deal with it, and they just try to look away, other direction. Yeah.
I assume you get a lot of questions regarding that as well, Steffen Pietsch. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so I'm actually basically with Britta. So SAP software is often considered and perceived as safe and secure, which is basically correct, but only as long as it is configured correctly. And there is often a lack of skills to really assess the SAP systems and the situation, and therefore not the right skills to really assess the risks inside the company. And that's why it's often treated as safe and secure, which is not always the fact.
Yeah, it's important to understand the risk and then be able to act, which leads me to the next question. Imagine you're a CEO, not deep into SAP, and you get hacked on your most important SAP system. Who would you reach out to in first place? Imagine being the CEO. Would it more be like this Chief Information Security Officer like Markus Weissensel, or would it be someone else? Because mostly SAP Security is located in the SAP Basis. I always say in the machinery room somewhere, but finding that person in the machinery room costs a lot of time. And within that time, a lot of data can be lost. What are your thoughts about it, Markus?
I said it in my speech earlier today that from my perspective, the main task of the CISO is to search proactively for risks and for security risks especially, and grab them, and try to deal with them. And that's what I did in our company when I started as a CISO, because exactly what you mentioned was the case, that the security was only located in SAP, only in the basis, in the machinery room. And yeah, I think if you have asked this question like 2 or 3 years ago, exactly the answer would be that they call the SAP guys. And now today it's changing. Yeah, it's exactly changing that they would call me. I guess, I assume. Yeah.
Britta, what do you think?
That's where it should be. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Markus, right? I think we see traditionally the CEO may not necessarily know even who to call, right? When they say, oh, geez, they're with my SAP system. Ideally, they should contact the CISO, or they contact Accenture to come in and help, obviously. That's option number 2, right? But yeah, ideally, the right answer is the CISO is involved in those. And or we see a lot of companies that have an SAP security director or security function that is connected with the CISO. But yeah, that's the ideal view. But I think a lot of companies just are not there yet.
Steffen, your thoughts on it?
Well, from my point of view, we need the joint forces of the CISO and the CIO, because the CISO comes with the, let's say, method competency and a broad security knowledge, while in the CIO organization, we typically have a lot of knowledge about the SAP, let's say, ecosystem and the various aspects. As you mentioned, the SAP Basis in the machinery room, for sure, they are the right people to configure the system according to certain guidelines, or to find a misleading configuration. But security in the SAP space is more than just configuration. We have, for example, custom code. We have also the entire stack, which starts below the SAP system itself, which considers network configurations, or when we look at hybrid landscapes, there's a lot of more that is not only located knowledge-wise in the SAP Basis. So therefore, I think you need the IT organization as a knowledge driver in order to figure out where the problem comes from, but also the CISO organization for the methodological part and how to deal with the problem and escalate steps into the right direction.
I couldn't agree more. I also see audit in that role to complete all the 3 lines of defense that you see behind me, as they need to make sure that the confirmation of risk is acceptable due to regulatory requirements and maybe even internal policies on the internal risk appetite, what needs to be done. So I think from a 3 lines of defense perspective, all these 3 lines should sit on the same table when it comes to a big project like migrating to the cloud or a big system upgrade or whatever, and really consider from all three perspectives, ideally backed up by the C-level, what needs to be done. Do you agree on this, Markus?
Absolutely, yeah. That's what we discovered throughout our recent project we did, yeah. And yeah, we got to know that the alignment is the key to success between those three lines of defense. Yeah. Need to figure out where the competency sits, the skills for security, and yeah, make ends meet. That's the key to success from my perspective. Yeah.
You're mentioning skills. Skills is super important because I believe SAP security is not in everybody's comfort zone of skills so far. So how important are skills from your perspective to understand SAP and tackle the risk, Britta?
Huge, right? And it's a very unique skill set because you've got a combination of skills there. It's the SAP specific security skills, and they vary based on the platform, right? So it's a bit of a diverse platform there. But then it's really also the generalist security skills, right? Understanding risk, understanding the broader platform structure, understanding data and data privacy. And then you've got the other component as well as the business process, right? It's the business application. So understanding how is a sales order being processed, right? How a purchase order is being processed, and what are the risks there, and not just executing what you're told and what a business user says, but being able to think about the risk and potentially arguing otherwise. So it's these three combinations of skills that are very difficult to find.
Yes, Steffen, and there is also tremendous need for the SIs. Like Accenture is doing a great job in skilling up the people over there to have the competencies, but there are expectations also to the SIs in the SAP ecosystem. What do you think about that?
First, I would like to add one additional point to the skills question. I think it's not only about skills, it's also about the culture. So you need kind of a sense of urgency in the company, and you cannot delegate security or SAP security to a certain group of people. They care for the security. It must be the culture of the company to have this feeling that security is relevant for everyone. And then you need these rare species of SAP security guys who are able to secure your system and to help you out. So these may come from the SIs, but they also should be part of the company itself. So I do believe that investing in your own people's knowledge as an SAP customer is really worth the investment, and that you can make use of external partners for speeding up this process and giving you some guidance and auditing your processes and your teams and your systems. But ultimately, it's your responsible, and you cannot delegate this responsible neither to an SI nor to anyone else.
Yes, it's truly right. And in last consequence, it's always the company itself who's responsible. It's never the SI or anybody else. It's too easy to say I outsourced my SAP and they are responsible for it. No, this is not the case. But there need to be the skills to review if the requirements are fulfilled, for example. And I couldn't agree more. It's important to implement a security culture that starts with people. Every culture in the world starts with people, not with technology. And due to a matter of fact, almost 90% of all successful breaches in SAP are related to people issues, not to technology issues. And you mentioned that, Steffen, SAP in the standard, it's mostly secure. There's nothing to talk about it, but it's everywhere the modifications where people take the hand on, where extra code is programmed, where configuration has been manually set. This is where vulnerability arises and where we need to move forward. Markus, how did you deal with that at Fuchs Petrolub?
As I already said, we recently started a project because we discovered it together with an external partner. I'm not sure if I can say the name, but anyhow,
you can name it if you want to.
It was nomonkey, of course, and it was a great project and with absolutely very good findings that we made. And the point I want to make is that we tried it on our own several times before and discovered that we absolutely need external help. Yeah, this is the key, because you cannot make it with the internal resources, and you cannot do it with the internal security organization simply on their own. And yeah, I think the most important or interesting finding was that throughout the presentation we had after the project was that the employees, the staff, had came proactively to us and asked for trainings and said, okay, we feel the need, we need training. And I think that was really good to see that they, as Steffen also already said, it's key that the user recognizes that they have the need to get trained, yeah? Because they are really the first layer of defense there.
Thank you for those insights, and thank you for the flowers. We are very glad you get valuable insights out of that. But still, going a step beyond that, sometimes we have even made the experience that we bring up some severe vulnerabilities, like, for example, having SAP Star with a default password in production. And this is being presented to a C-level. And the C-level still pushes it away because they know we don't need to do anything about that. But understanding SAP, this is like one of the worst case scenarios and nightmares. Steffen, what do you think about companies that just refuse to take that corporate responsibility?
So first, I do not want to prejudge anyone without knowing the situation one is in. But ultimately, we're talking about budgets and resources. And I think it's not that someone who does not act on that field is only careless. It is the question if she or he has the power to get the budget for such kind of measures, because improving security typically is not a one-day job. These are programs which take some months, and as we talk about culture change, are ongoing efforts, and this is not a one-time job. So therefore, it is the question if you are able to bring this up to the board and achieve that kind of priority shift, that security measures are not always deprioritized and other topics are more important on the table. So therefore, both, again, the CISO and the CIO sitting at the board table must create this kind of sense of urgency there in order to keep and get their budgets.
Britta, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, 100% agree with Steffen, right? And I think Steffen said earlier, it's a bit of a black box, right? It still is. It's been a black box for 20, 30 years, right? And people take sort of the ostrich approach and put their head in the sand and try to wish it away. But it's become more complex, right, over the years. When it was the old R3 on-prem, you know, it was a lot easier to protect than it is now. And it's, I think your CISOs or your leadership thinks, well, the application may be, you know, open, but we've got our network under control, right? With the way SAP and S4 have moved, you really have to look across the enterprise, really make sure you've got security controls in place across the board, and not just rely on your network being secure. So yeah, I think it's still considered that black box.
Yes, but now we are in an interesting situation because many enterprises are shifting from on-prem to the cloud. So this is the ultimate opportunity from my perspective to get rid of vulnerabilities you had in your old work that you don't want to have into in your new world. Testing efforts are being there anyways, and a budget needs to be acquired as well to do that. So why do not all companies include security in their cloud migration? Markus, any thought on that?
I always get to know that from the conversations with my peer partners, other CISOs. They also always say when it comes to SAP security that they always get the comments, don't we have other bigger problems there? Nothing can happen there. We have never seen anything happen there. We have those phishing attacks, those cybersecurity attacks, those ransomware attacks, exactly, yeah. And yeah, but that could not be the reason just to look away like an ostrich, yeah, like Britta said, and put the head into the sand and just hope that it goes away. Yeah, exactly that.
Steffen, any thought on this as well?
For me, it feels like the comparison to sound engineering at the concert hall. You recognize SAP security only when you have a serious problem, as with the sound engineering in the concert hall. Now, back to the cloud journey. I think we have to distinguish what we mean when we talk about cloud. Do we lift and shift an existing on-premise stack to, for example, a hyperscaler to do operations in that environment? Then we talk about shared responsibilities, and the security efforts on the customer side typically increase by far, and the necessary skills for secure operations increase as well. This is typically also kind of that journey to understand what does it really mean operating an SAP system in the cloud in such an environment. Which additional skills do I need in order to not end up in the concert hall example? So what we see at the DSAG is that customers start their journey to the cloud and are happy to getting rid of certain on-premise obstacles, but they now face very different new challenges, which also are really serious to tackle, and to need to require an upskilling of the internal team, because again, you cannot delegate these responsibilities entirely to an external party. So in my point of view, the security efforts on such a cloud journey are often underestimated.
Yes, and what I also see, and we discussed that, Britta, as well, I think it's super hard for enterprises to include security when they don't have the skills and know where the pitfalls might sit. So how do you define a tender if this is not your sweet spot of competency? And what, in addition, I also see the issue that security costs time, resources, and money. So it would blow up the entire business case and delay the project. Britta, you might have made that experience as well, so would love to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah,
it's absolutely, it's a problem, right? And that's it's a challenge to the SIs equally, right? Because receive these RFPs that consistently have little security scope. Again, depending on an organization's maturity level, you've got more or less scope defined, but in most cases, I would say it's very little. And that's, I think, where, you know, companies like yours, Jochen, right, and Accenture also, we try to get in front of the problem and help even before an RFP is being generated and or during the RFP Q&A process, at least, to try and trigger some of these questions to get the thought process rolling, right? To say, well, you've selected X, Y, and Z cloud, right? Do you have a perspective on what your cloud security reference architecture looks like? Do you have a data classification? So some of these basics that we feel are important define before you begin that journey. So we try and tackle it that way to get discussions going, but quite often it's too late. So that's where we've kind of built in some additional security measures in our delivery methodology to at least tackle some of the big vulnerabilities, right? And also focus on that education, that awareness, right? Make sure the business understands the impact a bit better to hopefully then make, create a change request if that's what's needed to add on security sooner rather than later. It's absolutely a problem. So I agree, right? Education beforehand to make an RFP a lot more specific would be a huge value.
Yes, and this was one of the motivation why we founded nomonkey independently, because we wanted to build the bridge of the entire ecosystem to unite and educate companies out there to do the right things. This is super important because we believe that security is nothing where you work against someone. It's something where you can learn from each other and really share best practices, as these challenges are for everybody the same, of those 440,000 SAP customers worldwide. So coming to the last quick round before we end this wonderful discussion, which I could continue for even much longer, I would like to ask you individually, if you had one advice to increase security in SAP, which one would it be beside patch, and patch? Starting with you, Britta, again.
Patch. No, I think process, right? Define a governance process. There's lots of tooling out there, right? And I'm all over tooling. There are so many different tools that are in the space. Like I said, we're leveraging Synapses in many cases for vulnerabilities, but not everybody has the budget for it. So the process is really a governance process, in my opinion, basis to get ahead of that security problem, right? Manually, if need be, and then build on top of that process to add tooling where you're able to, where your budget allows. So I think build that governance process to tackle the issue manually out of the gate. If you don't have budget for tooling, would be my recommendation.
Markus, thank you, Britta.
Absolutely agree. I think I would say skills, but skills is part of the governance of the operating model. Yeah, so training the people. I mean, of course, besides patching and the things that have already been mentioned. Yeah, giving the people the skills that they need to handle that. Yeah.
Jochen.
I would like to add one more patch. Patch your culture, because safety must not be the fifth wheel. It must be an omnipresent issue. And therefore, you need to, again, train and skill up your people and ensure the sensitization of the board of directors as well as other leadership teams.
Okay. So wonderful. I would like to sum it up real quick. I think it's super important what we have learned now to understand the risk. Where do the crown jewels sit and how do they need to be protected? Who has the responsibility to protect it, and do the people have the right skills to do so? This is super important, because only when we have that equal level of skills, it's also possible to talk about it. It's not possible when you have a heterogeneous knowledge set, I would say. Then for sure, define the right processes in terms of a strategy. Understand what needs to be done and who's responsible for it. And lastly, it's also important to have the right tools supporting the people and processes in place that are tailored to the security strategy, which can be different from every company depending on risk appetite, resources, budgets, and timelines. So nobody from outside can say that this is what needs to be discussed internally between those three lines of defense and covered by a C-level. And I think then it's a good start to enter a SAP security project with partners like we have here in the round, and experts like Markus and Steffen. I think you could always give a good advice, and thank you for participating in this panel discussion. I'm really happy that you've been here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jochen.
Thanks. All a pleasure.
Stay healthy. Bye-bye. Back to you, Annie.
Bye-bye. Take care.